Tonight's show is brought to you by The Ultimate Production Tutorial. If you like what you see and you want to know more about film production, please follow the website link in the description below to learn more. While you're there, you can check out my show notes, where you can double-check my references, comment, and act like the film critic I know you are. Also, all of the items on the website are affiliate links, so if you find anything of interest, please click on through. Finally, please subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, pray, and send good vibes to help us keep delivering great content. And now, on with the show. Welcome to a special edition of Movie Night Madness. I'm your host, Sisyphus Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host and research partner, Doc Rock. And I think tonight he might be somebody else.
Divine, Werewolf Splits Ryan.
We're going to work on that.
Oh, yes.
Also,
not ready for prime time.
No. On tonight's agenda, I have a short presentation about the production that went into this film. Then I'm going to have an interview with a very special guest, and we will watch the movie. And after that, we'll have a discussion all together about what we just saw. I'd like to foster a You're on the Couch with Me vibe, so if at any moment you feel like making a comment, asking a question, or vibrating your head violently until you have a nosebleed, feel free to do so. So tonight's movie, Scanners, released in 1981, written and directed by David Cronenberg, and stars Jennifer O'Neill, Stephen Lack, and Patrick McGowan. Scanners, this is the Rotten Tomatoes score. Seems kind of low. I can understand. It's very 80s. The music is a little weird, and it was shot in Montreal, so it's got that Canadian feel. This was Cronenberg's most profitable film until The Fly, 6 years later. He shot the movie on a $4 million budget, which is $13 million today, and his domestic box office was $14 million. So he pretty much tripled what was invested into the film. So the director is David Cronenberg. He's a Canadian director, screenwriter, and actor. His principal original, he is the principal originator of the body horror genre, with his films exploring visceral body transformations, infectious diseases, intertwining psychological and physical and technological stuff. His movies are very weird. I'd compare him, if there's really no way to compare a David Cronenberg film to other movies, it's somewhat on the horror side, it's somewhat on the science fiction side, but it's always very weird. Like, there's these very weird moments, and they're very psychological and emotional. Like, they put you in a weird bind. Movies like Naked Lunch, it's a regular movie, but he has this like relationship with his typewriter, and he turns into a cockroach at some point, and there's this whole transformation thing that happens. And really, the movie is for that particular scene. Like, you're watching this movie, the movie's so-so, but that scene is wonderful. It's wonderfully gross. And so I put him in the same category as David Lynch. His movies are his own. Nobody has ever repeated or been able to do the same thing that he has. These are the movies that he's also known for: Videodrome, Brood, The Fly. The Fly is an excellent film. It's definitely, it won multiple Academy Awards. I think it was nominated for 9. It won 7. Pretty crazy. The special effects in Scanners was done by the great Dick Smith. Dick Smith has 87 movies under his belt. He did all kinds of special effects makeup work. We're going to see a clip on one of the video clips of the Godfather makeup. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yes, in Amadeus. Yes, exactly. Amadeus. Yeah, the makeup that he does on that, like, you don't recognize. It's amazing how good the makeup is. So we're going to watch that clip. And also Chris Wallace. Chris Wallace was responsible for Gremlins and Return of the Jedi. He's more sort of a creature latex expert. So these two folks together got, they work very well together because they came back together to work on The Fly. So Cronenberg, Dick Smith, and Chris Wallace worked all together on The Fly again afterwards. Tonight's presentation is going to be video heavy because most of the stuff that I found online came from these particular videos, so might as well hear it from them in particular. So this is a little bit about the financing, the script writing, and the production that went into this film directly from Cronenberg in a 2015 interview.
I just wanted to ask about Scanners, because I had heard the story that quite a few of the scenes were written the day of shooting for them. And I wanted to ask if that was true the story I heard and what it was like working like that.
Yeah, it is true. And Scanners was definitely the most difficult movie I have ever made in my career. And one of the reasons was that in those days in Canada, sometimes the money was there before the movie was there. It seems strange now, but there were tax write-offs. So in sort of October, suddenly the accountants for many doctors and lawyers and dentists would say to their clients, you need a tax write-off, you've made too much money. And so they would invest in your movie, but it would only come at the end of the year. So suddenly, I would get a producer saying, do you have any ideas for a movie? And I would say, yeah, there's these psychic, this kind of underground, these people kind of can read minds, and okay, we're shooting in 2 weeks. And now that now seems like paradise, because you don't get that money that easily anymore. But the downside was that you had to make the movie, and of course, you were totally unprepared. And of course, there's a lot of special effects and things in Scanners, explosions and gunshots and so on, and famously an exploding head. And so we started to shoot, and it was very cold in Montreal at the time. It was late fall and it got really cold, and we were completely disorganized. And so I was often, while everybody else would go to lunch, I would stay on the set writing what we were going to shoot later that afternoon. And that's not a good way to make a movie. It really isn't. And we did have to do reshoots, which I normally never do, but they weren't really the normal kind of reshoots where you're reshooting something that didn't work very well. And these were scenes that were actually written to make sense of what we had done before. Half the time we didn't know what the plot was about or what was going on. And in the movie, I learned a lot because while we were editing the movie, sometimes you'd see a character and then you'd cut away to another character. The off-camera character kept talking, but that was dialogue that I would write while we were editing the movie, you know, to make sense of what was going on, because a lot of it didn't make any sense. However, it turned out to be the #1 film in North America. It was my first film that was the #1 film for some reason, and it was very successful, and it has been, you know, imitated many times and so on. But it was not a good way to make movies, and I don't recommend doing that. You know, I mean, it just talk about pressure. It was huge, and there was a lot of craziness and neurosis and a lot of difficult times with that movie. And I don't, it's as I say, I knew that if I survived Scanners, I could survive anything.
So that sounds like crazy college film making with a real budget of $4 million in 1981. So here's a quick 3 minutes on the special effects and specifically Dick Smith and his prowess. And then after that, we're going to go into pyrotechnics with the pyrotechnics expert.
Smart at what he was doing.
David really wanted a very visceral, live quality to everything. And we were having a lot of problems trying to do certain things. And that's when I said, you know, we're just going to really have to bring in more muscle talent to achieve some of these results. And I suggested Dick Smith. So they said, well, if you can encourage Dick Smith to come, and if he'll meet our budget, we would love to have him.
Dick invented his own ways to do things, and I think a much better way to do things. You know, I mean, it was a different time, and Dick was pretty much a one-man show, and he did everything out of his basement laboratory in his house in Larchmont, and it was a little teeny basement. It was not big by any means, and it had a very low ceiling, and it was packed full of stuff.
He just pioneered so much stuff, from the sculpting part to God, the application and different separating a makeup in different pieces and the coloration. He was always coming up with some new stuff.
It's amazing.
And everybody just like learned from him, you know, and went on from there. That's why he's like a great inventor, you know. He's a combination of like a fantastic makeup artist and mad scientist.
You could stand right next to what he created and not see the delineation of lines. It was that fine. He really mastered this tissue paper thin skin and capturing, you know, all of the pores and the hairs, and he would literally lace hairs for hours through little thin, delicate appliances that were feather thin. And then these were bonded with different adhesives that we worked on so that everything moved in a natural way.
So we went down to visit Dick, and all this fascinating stuff that was downstairs, like Linda Blair's head from The Exorcist, and then he was suggesting doing this and that and da-da-da-da, and a whole list of material that we had to buy while we were in New York. So that's what we did, came back to Montreal, and then they hired a third person, which was Chris Wallace from Los Angeles. He was the one who had the most experience with foam latex and, you know, monster things and stuff. So it was great. It was kind of like a mad frat house of special effects makeup.
The way scanners came to me was I was actually working at another shop in LA, and Dick Smith called up. I was literally shaking answering the phone because I had never spoken to Dick Smith before, and he was the god of makeup. And so he said that he was advisor on a show that was shooting in Montreal. They needed somebody there right away. Could I jump on a plane and get up there and help him out for a few weeks? The script was changing as I got there. I literally, you know, was reading through it, and I'm going, well, what about this? And I go, no, we're not doing that. We're not shooting that. We're changing that to this. And so it was hitting the ground running for me, and fortunately, Stéphane Zupuy was there, a very, very talented makeup artist. Was not that experienced at the time, but, you know, when you're good, and he was good.
So that was the makeup, and now we're going to go into the pyrotechnics. And I like this particular story because there's one specific lesson you need to remember when you're working with pyrotechnics, and that's know how many squibs you have on set.
Has to do. Pyro guys need to educate a film production crew more than anybody else doing their job, because their work is so critical and potentially dangerous. There was a scene where Gary had to blow up a gas station, I think it was, in the movie. And we were out on location, he'd done all the rigging, and there was quite a crowd watching. And the fire went up, and he had, I don't remember the number of, say, 4 major explosions to go off. And they went off 1, 2, 3, very dramatic. The crowd was thrilled. It was, you know, 4th of July. Then they cut. And so the crews, the people watching started moving in very quickly. They, you know, wow, let's get closer to this big burning fire. I'm not sure why humans do that, but they do. And Gary was great. He knew there was one thing that had not gone off, and he had to fight to keep those people back, and he did fight, and he did keep them back. And 2 minutes later, a 50-gallon drum flies through the air from another explosion. It must have gone 60 feet in the air.
I've worked with a lot.
I thought that was amusing. Like, no, there's one that didn't go off yet. So, and here's a description, a really well done description. Part of the interview actually comes from the video that we just watched. But he goes into like the complexity of the masks and stuff. So this is the most famous scene in the film that's been used as GIFs all over the place. You guys probably have seen it, and the description is actually a lot of fun.
The head explosion scene from Scanners is easily the most famous scene from the film, and although the film was made 34 years ago, it still looks realistic by today's standards. The filmmakers used the process of trial and error to get the final effects seen in the film. The filmmakers tried to use a plaster head, but it just looked like a plaster head. And they also tried a wax head, however the wax was too hard and it didn't explode properly. They then took a life cast of Louis Delgrand's head and made latex outside and a plaster support for the inside of the head. They then filled the head with anything that they could get their hands on, such as leftover burgers, rabbit liver, fake blood, syrup, and even dog food, and then they sealed it with wax. They couldn't explode the head in the university lecture hall where they were filming the rest of the scene, because it was too much of a mess, so they took it to a warehouse and put up a black background behind the head. The filmmakers then tried blowing up the head with the cameras rolling, but this was very problematic. They tried blowing up the head with pyrotechnics, which didn't work because you could see the sparks. They also tried blowing it up with air pressure, which gave them a ridiculous ballooning effect. After numerous failed attempts at blowing up the head, Gary Zeller had had enough. He said, "Get the cameras rolling, get inside the trucks, and close the doors and windows."
Gary took a big shotgun and went lie down behind the dummy, pointed it like right there, and then he blew the hell out of it.
So if you can't get it done right, shoot it. So, with the spirit of Halloween, I decided to invite a paranormal specialist and a good friend of mine, Ryan Iwanki. Iwanek! I knew it! I was going to mess that up. Ryan Iwanek.
Ivonic, but yes.
Ivonic. I apologize. I practiced it a couple of times this afternoon. It was like, I'm going to mess this up, and I messed it up. So I apologize. To talk to us about the probability of the paranormal activities in this film. How you doing, Ryan? What's going on?
I think I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm awesome. I'm so glad you're here with us. I'm very excited about this. Let me get you back online. There you go. So stop the share. What'd you think of the movie? First of all, we got to watch it on Tuesday. It was your first time, yeah?
Yeah, I think it was actually a Thursday. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, it was my first time. It's a movie I've known about for a long time and never looked at. I actually didn't realize that the plot was what it was. I thought it was totally different, so it was nice that I was surprised by it. And it was a very 80s movie, is the easiest way I can put it.
Yep, absolutely. The music particularly was very 80s. So, of the things that you saw in the film, Paranormal Activity, can you make a list of the things? What did you see? And tell me a little bit about the paranormal phenomena that you saw in the film.
So in the film, they have, of course, the idea of telepathy, and that's essentially what they're referring to as scanning. I would argue that they're conflating that with some stuff that is more psychokinetic. That is not just information gathering. I mean, that would be how you get the head exploding thing. They also have some other stuff that is related to what would be referred to as energy healing or energy medicine these days, or Reiki or things like that, which actually does have a surprising basis to it, or a surprising amount of data behind it. So that's some of the stuff that relates to affecting people's heart rates and stuff like that, which you can of course do in your own body too, but it's more interesting when it's someone else or an animal or anything like that. So I was really surprised when I was looking at all that stuff that in principle, a lot of the stuff in that movie, the plot of the movie isn't really super implausible. What is implausible, or at least what would be very surprising, is the scale of the effects. That you do not see anywhere in research, as far as I'm aware. And anywhere that's even reported, it's so phenomenally rare that it's almost mythological. Nonetheless, there have been some interesting historical cases of people being capable of things that meet the kinetic requirements of what it would take to melt someone's head or blow it apart type of thing. Wow. So that's kind of why I say that's why I came out and being technically I could in principle this is plausible. It's just unlikely to the point where you're probably never going to see it.
Okay. All right. Of the ones that you've listed, which ones do you feel that are the most empirically provable? What have you come across as far as data is concerned?
So some of the stuff regarding, well, first and foremost, some of the stuff involving information gathering in general. That's a whole industry now. Like if you want to reduce it down, or at least generalize it to the whole field of remote viewing, like that's a whole little cottage industry now because it works so well, or can work so well if you get the right people and all stuff. Other stuff would be some of the stuff involving affecting, for example, a person's heart rate or any of the those distant sort of biopsychokinetic effects is what it has sometimes been referred to as. That too has quite a lot of data on it. If you look at, for example, William Bankston's research on mice, where you like give mice cancer and get people to essentially focus on the mouse or the mice, and they straight up cure the cancer to the point where they try to re-inject the mouse with the cancer and it wouldn't take. There's a whole long history with that. It's been replicated many, many times, and he gets a lot of independent funding because of it, because it works.
Okay. Could you say his name again?
William Bankston. He usually just says Bill Bankston. He's done some work with that. He's also done some work with, well, can we put this intent into water and bottle it, and then does it give you the same effect? And apparently it does. In some cases, it gives a stronger effect than for certain things than if it's a person doing it to you. And then he's also more recently been doing work on, can you just record it as an audio file and will that do something? And that also will do something. It's a weaker effect. But and the thing is, they don't know what they're measuring. So they have this multi-million-dollar machine, if I remember correctly, of like all these different instruments. And he jokes that, the speakers they then got to play it back are like these $45 speakers from Amazon. And so, so like there's clearly something to it. But the problem is, as with all psychical research in general, nobody knows what. They can show that this stuff works, but in terms of the actual mechanism, nobody has any idea what it is.
People who do remote viewers say that anyone can do it. Are you more on the side, do you believe that people can be trained to do remote viewing, or you have to be born with a special extra something?
Well, it's very much anyone can do it. And I'll give you a funny story from that research. So one of the people who was like the head of that research, was deeply involved in it, was Russell Targ. And he used to be a laser physicist, and then they called him in to do. Basically, he became one of the remote viewing researchers, and so he's very much of the opinion that anyone can do it. You don't even need to train them. Training arguably doesn't even help. I don't know. I can't remember if he takes it quite that far, but in that research, they wanted to find a scientific control because they had, if I remember correctly at the time, a guy named Pat Price, who was sort of like the most psychic person in the world or something at that point, if I remember correctly. He was very up there. I think he was like a former cop or something at that time.
Okay.
And so, but they wanted a scientific control, someone who wasn't involved or knew anything about any of the psychic stuff at all. So they called in a lady named Hella Hammond, and I think she was like a friend of someone or whatever. And so she was someone, that she'd never thought about this stuff or any of that stuff. So they set her down as a scientific control to see how does she do, and she turned out to be the most psychic person they'd ever seen. And she was someone who she was supposed to be the control. And so when they were finding stuff like that, they were like, well, clearly this is just a thing that people can do to varying degrees, and likely has a normal distribution, like you see with other areas of human performance, where some people might be just better, just more essentially quote unquote talented, more talented than other people, and that can be a genetics thing and a whole bunch of other stuff. And other people will be on the other side of the bell curve. But generally speaking, it seems like anyone can do it. Training certainly can help, it's kind of just a matter of pushing it further, at least in my opinion. Like I think there's more than enough there to say, anyone can do it and people should do it. So
Yeah, gotcha. So that's sort of the extent of my list of questions today. Before we start the film, is there anything else you want to tell the audience about the phenomena that you can find in this film?
You will be surprised how much research has been actually done on this and how real a lot of it is. And I'm going to go into that with some stuff, I guess, after the film. I have a couple of just short little document things, and then I can point people in the direction of other research. But yeah, that's the general thing. You will be surprised just how much there is there in the real world.
Right, that's awesome. Thank you very much, Ryan. So here we go with our presentation. If you experience any headaches, shortness of breath, it's just a sign that Justin Trudeau is in blackface for Halloween again. If you like what you see and you want to know more about film production, please follow the website link in the description below to learn more. While you're there, you can check out my show notes, where you can double-check my references, comment, and act like the film critic I know you are. Also, all of the items on the website are affiliate links, so if you find anything of interest, please click on through. Finally, please subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, pray, and send good vibes to help us keep delivering great content.